In this video, I'd like to explore the relationship between narcissists and HSPs, highly sensitive people. And as usual, I'm going to come from this from two different perspectives. My professional perspective as a therapist and my personal perspective as an HSP. And in this case, an HSP who has on a number of occasions been in a relationship with a narcissistic personality style person and actually married one. So I have insider information, let's say. So what is the connection? Is there a connection? Is there a link? Unfortunately, there can be. Not always, but HSPs are great targets for narcissists. Now, I'm going to use the word narcissist, and that doesn't mean that they have NPD. It just means that they have been identified with the narcissistic personality style and or can be narcissist NPD as well. Now, why is this? Why is it so toxic and so difficult for this relationship? Because HSPs, they are very vulnerable to narcissists. The high empathy and commitment to getting everything right, you might call it perfectionism. I actually don't like that word, perfectionism. I don't think perfect exists. However, I do suffer from, and I will use that term, wanting to get things right. And that's not just in actions, and I know a lot of HSPs share this with me. It's also in words. You know, when we say something and we feel misunderstood, we will go very far to be understood. And I know that on a personal level. I'm going to go through some things to look out for and some reasons why HSPs can be very vulnerable in a narcissistic relationship. They don't spot the red flags. You know, it's really difficult when you're trying to get things right and make everything good and harmonious. In addition to the narcissist gaslighting the HSP also gaslights themselves. And this can be something like, I'm too emotional. Yes, I agree with you, I'm too emotional. Let's say the narcissist says, you know, the problem with you is you're just way too emotional. You take everything personally. You know, you're so weak. Get stronger, you know, pull up your socks, stop crying, whatever. And because one of the main things the HSP wants to do is make things right, and they've been told most of their life that they're too emotional. That is a personal perspective. That was my childhood, and no blame to my parents because they didn't understand this stuff. And it's only about 30 years of research, and my parents, I'm older than 30, so they were not aware of any of this in my childhood. So what happens is the HSP has been told this most of their life, or certainly most of their childhood. You're a crybaby, big boys don't cry. And by the way, it is about the same for male and female HSP, so it doesn't lean one way or the other, as many men as women are identified with the temperament trait, which is called highly sensitive person, which was discovered and researched by Dr. Elaine Aron, A-R-O-N. Please look her up. A wealth of knowledge and information. So they don't see the narcissist's behavior as a problem. It's actually very familiar. And if you listen to the word familiar, it has the word familial in it, which means, you know, it's come from the childhood environment. And it becomes very familiar. And in a strange sort of way, it feels safe to be told that you are sensitive. And that creates a lot of shame for the HSP because they are ashamed of being told they're sensitive. They're ashamed of being told they're weak. Because unfortunately in our society, and I think I can say this with a lot of evidence, that we really applaud and support people that are more narcissistic than we do that people are sensitive and seen as weak. We see narcissism in our society usually in the form of success and making money. I'm not saying all those people that do those things are narcissistic. However, it does tend to show up in places like corporations, the military, medicine, things like that. There's a 50% possibility of narcissism being in those arenas and others. So if you're going in those arenas, you may have higher level of narcissism than somebody who isn't. You know, Hollywood is a great example of that. And this isn't judging anybody. This is based on research. And I absolutely believe in it because I've lived in Hollywood, so I've seen some of it for myself. So there's more potential for the narcissist to gaslight the HSP, because the HSP agrees with the behavior. The HSP, is not pushing back at the narcissist because, yes, their family have told them that. And this was, as I said, certainly my experience. It was how I was referred to. I was referred to overly emotional. In fact, they didn't know what to do with me because of my high emotions. And at the age of 8, I was put on diazepam, Valium, which is extraordinary to say now. Didn't help because it didn't get to the core thing. And HSPs, as I said earlier, is a temperament trait, but it's also genetic, and very few temperament traits or personality traits are genetic. Most of those are epigenetic, and they come from our lifestyle, our environment that we've grown up in. So this is an extraordinary one, and it sometimes distresses people when they hear that HSP is sort of hardwired into them, like my hair is red and my eyes are blue. It's a very similar thing. Doesn't mean you can't do anything about it. So because I have been in several narcissistic relationships, and I married a narcissist, and I have divorced the narcissist as well, because you do need to get away from them, especially if you are super sensitive. And I no longer apologize for being super sensitive because it's a superpower, and it doesn't mean that I'm better than a non-HSP. We need both. We need HSPs and non-HSPs to make our world work. And the interesting thing is this goes across all species. This isn't just humans. So we see it show up. There's a lot of research on that it shows up in other species as well. And what's really interesting about this is the lack of empathy that the narcissist has is very disproportionate to the high level of empathy that the HSP has. So it's quite extreme. There's a lot of contrast to it. However, it doesn't protect the HSP in this situation. It actually makes them even more vulnerable because they will continue to want to get things right and do things right. Now I'm going to pause here and just go through an acronym that Dr. Aaron created called DOES, D-O-E-S, or DOES, if you like that. And it's these 4 traits of an HSP. And this, you give yourself a moment to think about what I'm about to say and see if any of this aligns with you. This for me was life-changing. So the D stands for deep processing. And what that means is an HSP will deeply process things that they've experienced, whereas a non-HSP won't. Now that, again, that doesn't make them better. It just means that they have a different way of absorbing information in their life. So for example, a simple little example would be you're sitting with a friend or a partner on the sofa watching a film, and the film might be very deep and meaningful or disturbing, and the friend gets up and goes into the other room, gets a drink, makes a meal, whatever, and they've forgotten about it. The HSP doesn't. They linger in these thoughts. They ruminate on these thoughts. And 5 hours later, or whatever, they might be having dinner, and the HSP is still very much in the deep processing, some people may call it analyzing, of what they've seen in the film. So they really hold on to things, and they go deep into the emotion of them. The O stands for overstimulation. HSPs are easily overstimulated. Now, humans in general, we filter our world through our 5 senses: what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste, and what we feel. Now, feel can be internal, emotional, and it can also be external. I'm sitting in a chair right now in a room of a certain temperature. So that is normal. That is typical for humans to filter their world through their 5 senses. However, for an HSP, it's very heightened. We may be very connected to sound in particular. I'm one of those people that, if I'm walking down a street and a car backfires, I will probably squeal and jump, which can be embarrassing, and where other people are just walking down the street. And I feel very, like, why me? Why am I like this? Why are other people? This is what really got me into looking into this. Why are other people not crying as much, not as emotional? Why aren't they jumping at certain sounds and things like that? And it's very specific to HSPs, that sound and vision are very, very heightened. So I think the statistic is for HSPs, we take in about 80% of our filtering of our environment through our eyes. So a really great tip, if you ever feel overstimulated and you can't really get out of the situation, just close your eyes for 10 seconds or more. And it really does shut the world out, which is great. And it can reset you. Now, statistically, 20% of the population are HSPs. So, and as I said, it's parity between men and women. So it's it's quite a substantial amount of people in your life that, for every 10 people in your life, there will be two, or for every 5 people in your life, there will be one person in those 5 people, statistically, that will be an HSP. So it's a good time to think about that as well. Maybe there's HSPs in your life. Maybe you're not one yourself. Now, they are not HSPs, by the way. This is just for description. This is not a label. I don't label myself as I am an HSP. I say that I have the trait of a highly sensitive person. So the E stands for, no surprise, very emotional and very empathetic. And there was a film years ago called The Sixth Sense, and this sums it up for me. I remember a line in it where the character said, "I see dead people." And for me, I feel hurt people, and I genuinely do. And I never thought it was an odd thing or an atypical thing. It's just when I walk into a room, I don't do it all the time, but if I'm in a space with people and there is hurt in the room, which there frequently is, people are struggling with things, I may not go into it with them or ask them any questions. I may be a total stranger, but I really feel that, which for me has been fantastic. And this has helped me have this superpower, because it's given me intuition, a lot of intuition, which is great when I'm working with clients. So we're quite emotional, as I've talked about already, and we're quite empathic, empathetic to others. And we will take time and be with that person and do our best to create some stability and downregulate their emotions if possible. And the third one is subtle stimuli sensitivity. Now, all that means, it's a mouthful, but what it means is we really pick up on the really subtle things. For example, when I am in an environment, I'm visually scanning all the time. Again, I didn't think that was atypical. I didn't realize it was not a sort of normal thing to do. It's just what I do. And I see a lot of detail. I smell detail, if you know what I mean. I taste it sometimes. I hear it. So a great example of that would be, I walk into a room and I smell something, and I say to the people in the room, the person in the room, "Do you smell that? It smells like whatever." And they'll say, no, I don't smell anything. We have this heightened connection to our senses, and we have a heightened connection to the sort of the subtle stimuli in a room. So that's the upside of intuitiveness that I mentioned in that DOES. But the downside is the intuition, the intuitiveness can be very dangerous for the HSP in a narcissistic relationship, because they are scanning all the time. They're using all their senses to see if everything is okay. And if everything isn't okay, they want to make it right. Now, this goes into the territory of people pleasing. And if you've seen my other videos, I talk about me being a recovering people pleaser, which I am. But it really is, it creates a very push-pull relationship. It's emotionally and physically exhausting for the HSP. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of burnout. And I remember in particular, one of my narcissistic partners, that was classic textbook. I won't go into all of the markers of narcissism, but I'm sure you know some of them. Love bombing is a big one at the start of a relationship, which can last for 6 days, 6 months, a year. In my case, it was probably a couple weeks, and it was full on. And I really got sucked in to the love bombing, the flattery, all of those things. And I'm not ashamed to talk about this, because I think these kind of things can help other people. Certainly to realize that I'm human and I've made my mistakes, or I've missed cues and I didn't see red flags. And this particular person was really the poster boy for it. There was a lot of gaslighting, and I couldn't see it as that. And I began to believe what he said about me. But the thing that I really wanted to talk about in that particular relationship was not the person, but the aftermath. And when he broke up with me, which was no contact. I know I'm meant to be doing that from the other side of the narcissistic relationship, but for him it was just no contact. Didn't show up to where we were meant to meet, didn't text. When I went sort of out of my mind for 2 weeks trying to find this guy, thinking something terrible had happened to him. And nothing had happened to him at all. It was just the discard phase of the narcissistic relationship with him. And what happened was, it took me a very long time to get over it. And the point I'm making about this is I remember very distinctly a girlfriend of mine she said, I'm quite shocked by your behavior. You really are taking this so personally. You've only known the guy for 6 months and he's gone. Get over it. And at the time, it really kind of stabbed me in the heart because I felt so weak and so vulnerable. And what is wrong with me? I didn't really know this guy for that long. I fell heavily into the relationship. And she was like, you're a grown woman. What's wrong with you? Which is sort of the adult version of being told you're a crybaby and you're super sensitive as a child. And I really carried that around for a long time until I had an assessment and found out that I do have this HSP temperament trait and all that goes with it. And I've forgiven myself for my behavior. Obviously, I did get over it, and I'm happy to say I'm in a very grounded and loving relationship now with a non-narcissist, because I did begin to look at the red flags. But please go easy on yourself if you are taking things very personally and you are an HSP. If you're struggling to really move out of things, you need support. You need support from your tribe. And what in this situation, tribe would be other HSPs. I know in some places, states and countries, there are groups that you can join, even if it's online. But be around like-minded people. And if you do identify some HSPs in your life, hang out with them more. Don't hang out with people that tell you that you're a grown woman and you need to get over it and you're acting. She actually said to me, you're acting like an 18-year-old. And it was very, very hard and very cutting. I don't blame her at all, because at the time I didn't know I was an HSP. She didn't know, and probably still doesn't know, about this type of personality temperament trait. And what I do now is I actually tell people, if I get into territory like that, I explain to them that it is something I'm doing my best to navigate, and please be patient with me. So we really get stuck in pleasing the narcissist, and it really doesn't go very well for us, because what we're doing is, and that's what happens with people pleasers, is we're abandoning ourselves all the time in the relationship. It's all about them. It's all about making it right. And they will continue to, they love bomb us first, then they devalue us, and then they discard us. And sometimes they hoover, which means they come back for us. And in all of that, they also alienate us from our friends and family, from our support group. And we then sometimes try even harder to make them happy and to make things right. Now, I know some people have said, maybe thinking while I'm talking about this, but there can be very, empathetic narcissists, which are called vulnerable narcissists. Yes, absolutely. But for me, this is the ways to sort of differentiate between a narcissist or a vulnerable narcissist and an HSP. If you give a narcissist feedback, they usually are reactive. Because what a narcissist really needs to be in their life is the victim, because they are the most insecure person in the room, in my opinion and in my experience. So they need to be the victim. And any which way they can do that, they will become the victim, and they will be reactive. They won't want the feedback. They will tell you you're wrong. They will gaslight you, whatever. So it's a very different response than the HSP, because when the HSP is given feedback or said, you're acting like an 18-year-old or whatever, they go inside. Well, this is certainly my experience, and evaluate that whole situation. Was I acting like an 18-year-old? What could I do instead? What does she think of me? It's lots of overthinking and rumination, and that could go on for quite some time. I'm talking about beyond a day. That can go on, that can ruminate, and we become it's almost like we have this inner critic that is telling us that we're these things, we're weak, we can't stand up for ourselves and all that. Now, I am what is called a extrovert, highly sensitive person, which I'm not going to talk about now. I'm just going to give you a little teaser for the next video. And there are extrovert and introvert HSPs. 30% of HSPs are extrovert. And it's a very interesting way of seeing, HSPs, because I think a lot of people think HSPs are shy. They think that they are want to sort of stay with themselves, which is part of being an HSP. I do like my downtime, but not necessarily. There are many of us that get on stage. They become actors, singers, dancers, comedians, musicians. So I'm going to talk about that in one of my future videos. Thanks very much for joining me today. Please hit the subscribe button and join us for more videos. And please give me your comments if there's something you'd like me to explain a bit more, or there's something you'd like to add to the conversation. Please do that. So all that remains for me to say is keep well, stay safe, see you soon.